Okay, so this maybe looks kind of bad with all these errors in here. So, but what basically we're going to be doing is we're going to be assigning the quantity input as a delegate because it has to be checked by the view controller for its input type. And we also have to disable the done button. So I did done button dot is enabled equals false, and item quantity input dot delegate equals self. So what I also have to add here is UI text input delegate, I believe. Yeah, text input delegate. That error should go away now. Yeah. And these two down here at target are basically, these are going to allow us to, let me just fix that, UI fix field, yeah. Just add that, fix that right there. Oops, it should be text field, not text input. My bad. So what add target is going to do is basically it's going to add events for checking. It's going to add events for checking whether or not the input was added to the quantity input and name input. Unfortunately, for the description, I couldn't figure out how to add a target to that as well, because we're using UI text field delegate, and that's a UI text view. I'm guessing you can add a UI text view delegate and maybe do the same thing, but I'll leave that for you for practice. For this particular example, it's maybe not really needed, but if you feel like doing it, feel free. So you might add a UI text view delegate and add something similar to this for the description. But here we'll only be checking the quantity and the name, because without these we don't have a valid item, because an item doesn't really need a description. So we leave description out of here. What's going on here is basically when we're going to have this function run, editing changed, for this quantity input and name input. Basically what this editing changed selector function is going to do is it's going to enable or disable the done button based on whether or not these are filled, and both of them have to be filled. So by default we set done button to disabled, so is enabled equals false, and that is set by default when we go to this view. And now we should program this editing change. Let me just fix this. I don't think we need this anymore. I don't think we even need this anymore. Let me see, because we have the type, proper type. All right, so now we're going to have to, there's an invalid character here. Let me fix that. So now let's move on to this editing changed. So I took the time beforehand to copy in the code, and so that I can explain line per line. So what we had before is we added target to these text inputs. Basically, we have a sort of event where this function is being constantly run. Basically, that's kind of, not exactly, but that's what you can think of it as. So in this function for editing changed, we check basically if these inputs are filled. They're both applied, this function is both applied to the quantity and the name. So we first check if there's at least one character, and that one character cannot be space or just empty, then return, so you just exit, and the done button is left as unselectable. Otherwise, we have something like this going on. Now, guard, notice here it's guard. It's not if. So in the Swift documentation, guard is basically like if, but it allows the results to go out of scope. And this is needed because we need to check the item name input outside of the function. It's not being input, particularly in this function. If that makes sense. This is one way to do it. I'm guessing you could also have some other function, you just access self outside and then you access the name input. But here, guard in particular allows you to access parameters from outside the scope of this function. So that's why we can have item name input, this input which is outside, it's in the view, it's in the class itself. It allows the conditions to go outside of the scope. So it's like I like to think of it as like a super if. So we have guard conditions. So the item name input has to be filled, and so does the quantity input. That's what this syntax is here. It's a little weird because it has commas, so it's basically saying, okay, so you have, okay, if this exists and this is true, so if the name is not empty, the quantity is not empty, then you are allowed to enable the button. So both of them have to be filled. And that's how you prevent the user from inputting an empty cell. Next, we got to have a way to prevent the user from inputting characters into the quantity field. So let's do that. So here's our final function in this view controller. It's text field, UI text field, and it says should change characters in range. This will prevent the certain registered delegates from having their characters input with letters. If that makes sense. So remember in our view did load, we set item quantity as a delegate. That allows us to include the item quantity input in the check for whether or not there are only numbers in the input. This way, we do not have the item name input or the item description input isolated to only numbers. We only wanted the quantity input to be isolated to numbers. That's why we only declared the quantity as a delegate. So let's move on to this function. Let's talk about it a little. So first, you have a set of characters. So you access them through these constants. Just pause the video. Feel free to type these down. Type them in. And you have character sets, so that's a property dot decimal digits, so all decimal digits, all numbers and decimal numbers. And then you have the character set defined as, well, this. So you have the characters. This is one way to do it. You can have you can do a literal string of A, B, all the way to Z. But here's one way to do it. So you have character set, and you have property characters in, and you have in string, so all the possible string characters that are letters. And then you just return the character set. This code will prevent you from inputting the names of the quantities with the quantity. This will prevent you from having quantities having letters. This will prevent you from having letters in your quantity input. So if I build this app, there shouldn't be any more errors. And I believe we are now ready to go through the app. So we're ready to finally run it and play with it a little. Okay, so here is our application. Just so you know, I moved over to the iPhone 8. Before it was iPhone 8 Plus. That's because I removed constraints and everything would have been shifted, and I didn't want to bother with the UI for now. You can do that on your own. It's a little simpler than the working on the programming side of things. So that's the focus of this tutorial. So let's add a plus. It moves over to the add new item screen. I'm going to add a new item name. Let's call it iPhone X quantity. So if you try to input letters, so I'm trying to press letters, characters like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, I can't do anything. But if I do numbers, it allows me to do that. So item quantity, let's say 999. Item description is optional, but I'm going to have one here anyway. For practice, maybe add a check to if the item description was left as is, you don't input it or just have it set to null or whatever, or maybe have it blank to begin with. It's up to you. But I'm just gonna type in one, the newest iPhone on the market. Let's type. Okay, we press done. So here's iPhone X. The segue performs twice because I added it twice. That's a mistake, but you can remove that. So here it is. Item. I'm gonna add another one just to make sure. So let's do Google Pixel 2. Item quantity. Let's do 1,000. Let's do the latest Google Android phone. And watch if I remove it, or hold on a sec, there's something wrong here, but anyway, you get the idea. Oh, there it goes. So it's a little slow to respond, but notice here now the done got disabled again. So let's do Google Pixel. Notice here how it's Google Pixel. It's empty. That might have to do with the options I set, so it might clear on edit. You might want to disable that. So, but we'll leave it for now. So I'm going to put 1,000. Done. There it is. It conforms to segue twice. I got to fix that, but you can fix that for practice. There you go. And there we go. We have items saved. We made our own items. They have names. They have quantities displayed in the cells, and then the description is added along with it. Even though it's not displayed in the table view, it's stored in the cell, and it's retrieved here. What you could also do for practice is sort of have an ID system where you input an ID, and instead of having everything saved in the cell directly, you can pull based on IDs. But I don't think we'll need that for this. It's because this gets the job done anyway for this little application. Don't worry about that. Just if you feel like practicing, do so. And that's it. So we have completely covered how to make a sort of item manager using the master detail view, where we made our own storage, we made our own custom items, we made our own adding view controller, and let's also see editing. And there we go. So that is our application. Thank you for watching. We hope this was helpful, and good luck with iOS development.